Thank you. So we're going to start at the top of the hour. My name is Maggie Schuster from the North Texas area. We'll be starting exactly at 10 o'clock today. So thank you and welcome. Appreciate it. Got some great presenters today. So I'm really excited. So welcome everyone. If just FYI, we are recording this. And if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat and I will make sure that we address them. So we'll start exactly in 1 minute. It's 10 o'clock. Well, welcome. My name is Maggie Schuster and I'm here with the Know Before You Fly Your Drone workshop. I think we're in number 13, if I remember, 12 or 13. So excited. With the North Texas Council of Governments, and if you're here, you know, the NorthTexasUAS.com is how you access our website. But we're recording all of these workshops today. I'm real excited about the recreational pilot. We have two amazing presenters today. I'm so excited. One of them being Tristan Malig, and he is from the Droners by Squadron, and it's a huge recreational club in San Francisco or California, excuse me. And then of course Adrian Doko, a lot of people know him. He's adding to his titles, so now he's going to be, or he is, the president of the North Texas drone user group here. So really excited to welcome them both. Well, let's get started. I mean, we have had a lot of different workshops all on just how to use drones and of course the FAA, but this is the first time that we are really addressing recreational pilots. So welcome, Tristan, really appreciate it. If you'll tell us a little bit about yourself, that would be great to start.
Sure, thank you, Maggie. I'm ex-military. I've spent quite a bit of time, about 4 years in military intelligence with the Navy, and as well working with Joint Special Operations Commands with SEAL team units, Delta Force, Marine Force Recon, everything else under the sun, and also with international units as well too, with data acquisition, and as well working with data and imagery, to be more specific. And to expound on that real quick, I actually got focused on drone technology when it was more used for more military applications. So the only piece of drone tech that I got into was I forgot who actually made it, but I was given the task to just test drive and see how it operates. And surely enough, it was a successful test. And then from there on, I graduated from the Art Institute here in San Diego in 2015 with a bachelor's art science degree in video game art, but with the focus on 3D modeling and as well cinematography and storyboarding, camera techniques, and so forth. And then other things that I got into is photography and cinematography. And then I got into the hobbyist side of drone use in 2017 when I first learned about DJI products, as well Autel, and one other company. I don't know if it even exists anymore, but anyway, I got really interested in using drone technology to the point where maybe this might increase my cinematography skills and try to get some nice vantage point shots using drones. And when I got my very first DJI drone, which was the Phantom 3 Standard, I totally fell in love with it, to the point where, okay, what do I want to do next? Do I want to continue this venture and invest more money into it? And from that day forward, up until this moment in time, it has been a great investment for myself, and owning like 6 drones right now that I currently use, each one having a different purpose. It allowed me to see the world in a different way as well too, not just to work with people who need some, quick shots and so forth to put in their advertisement or something. But as well, it gave me a different perspective of how I view the world now.
We actually had John Cooper speak on one of our workshops on
Hmm.
inspections. And John Cooper is one of the officers for your recreational drone club in
Hmm.
California. Can you tell us a little bit about the club?
Droners by Squadron was actually first started up as just an idea, as a concept to see if we could find other like mind or other recreational drone pilots out there to share ideas, to critique each other's photos or videos that they've taken, and then help improve each other to the point, to the degree of where how we could become better drone pilots. And in 2019, I started an offset group. I kind of like to think of it as like the top gunners of droners, like really, really push the limits of like developing better drone pilots out there with a strong emphasis on operational safety. That's the number one thing that I always stress about when I teach future drone pilots out there, or people who are aspiring to become drone pilots, or who just want to get into the scene, just to understand the operations of a drone. So with that being said, Droners by Squadron is a large conglomerate of like recreational and as well 107 pilots out there, or certified 107 pilots out there. And I wanted to create like a separate, like closed group of people who specialize in specified types of drone technology, FPV pilots to people who use mainstream drones like through DJI or Autel or uh, Parrot and Nafi and so forth. And my focus on there is to teach people who want to get into the drone scene, and to give them the basic operational know-how on how to operate a drone, and then from there teach them different camera techniques, everything from like dolly zoom shots, and as well, I call it an arcing or a crescent moon shot, like when you have like a half circular shot of a subject, things
Right.
like that. Just teach teach the novice drone pilot different techniques that I learned in a camera techniques class that I took in Art Institute.
Well, I know your group, and because Nettie Davis, who I do a lot
Hmm.
of clubhouse rooms with, and we were just at the UAV Expo. She had mentioned that you guys go out pretty much every weekend as a
Yeah.
group and invite everyone to come out, and there's a lot of people that come up and even ask you questions. But as a recreational pilot, um, first of all, identifying who is a recreational pilot, but
Hmm.
also it's so important, I believe, that if you're just starting out, to seek out groups like such as your group, because it's like you said, it's people that are enthusiasts that want to encourage other people into this passion of
Yes.
drone pilots. And it's a welcoming organization, just like the one here in the North Texas drone user group, that we try to encourage, but you learn a lot from other people, correct?
Yes, yes, we do. Um, some people that come in through Droners by Squadron are coming in with lots of flight hours and of lots of experience, and sometimes I even actually learn off from them. When I first started out, I had nobody teach me, but instead I was just self-taught. The only thing that I won't be self-taught is like the day when I go ahead and start studying for my 107, which I'm currently doing right now. But from time to time, I pick a person who's a licensed 107 pilot and pick their brain, and if I have any questions, I would ask them. But other than that, yeah. So like I said before, my my drone operating skills are like operating a drone. That's already in the bag. It's a done deal. Virtually, I could be thrown on You could throw me any drone, give me a minute, I'll learn it quick. Give me a day, I'll master that drone.
Right. But
Yeah.
what we really want to focus on is, and you mentioned this about safety. So,
Yes, yes.
and so let's talk a little bit about that, because the difference between a 107 and recreational, really the responsibility is, there's not a huge difference. I mean, when you're out there flying, whether you're flying with a 107 with a specific mission, or if you're flying as a recreational pilot, you
Mhm.
still have the responsibility of knowing the rules and regulations and registering your drone. And so can you go a little bit into that as a recreational pilot, the responsibilities and the safety protocols?
Yes, first of all, whenever somebody approaches me and asks me about like how do we get into the scene, it's easy for one person to tell the person's like, okay, what drone, you would recommend for them. But more importantly, it's the responsibility of a recreational drone pilot to tell them is like, this is not something you just get into it just to get into it. There's a big responsibility that comes along with, telling someone who wants to get into the scene that the most important thing, and if they can't respect this phrase that I'm about to say right now, then they have no business even getting into it. Um, and is that flying a drone, safety is paramount. Safety is paramount. I can't stress that enough. I mean, I myself, who once only crashed a drone once, is because I was distracted by somebody who kept asking me questions about drones while I'm in mid-flight. So with that lesson learned, and from that point on, and this was during my first year flying a drone in 2017. So from that point on, I vowed that I would preach the safety aspect of operating a drone.
So can you go a little bit further into what are your principles, so that for recreational pilots that are listening in right now, what are your principles, and where do you find the resources for safe practices?
Well, finding the resources after watching so many YouTube videos of like other recreational drone pilots out there, and I've even seen even commercial 107 pilots out there who've actually made mistakes. And with that being said, I always tell people out there, mistakes will be made, especially when you're first learning.
Sure.
But it's better to make the mistakes in an environment that's away from people, especially. I mean, I can't stress that enough. Um, Let me give you an example. One person I trained a while back who was already proficient in operating the drone, but he was not aware of his surroundings, wherever he was filming at. And unfortunately, he clipped a building or like hit the side of a building, but there was no cracked glass or anything, but he just clipped the side of a building. And I can't stress enough to him from that point on is like, you have to be focused at all times when you're flying.
Right.
So number one is staying focused at all times. Once you get that drone up in the air, it's you and that drone, as if like you should become one with the drone. I know it sounds a little interesting when I say it that way. It's like imagine yourself as like you're in the cockpit of that drone, like you're in the cockpit of an aircraft, like you're
Right.
actually in there. And if you can wrap your head around that notion, the likelihood of a pilot making mistakes is very, very close to zero. Very close to zero.
Well, I think
Number
the advantage of belonging to a recreational club, and I do encourage everyone to seek out information on recreational clubs. A lot of times I suggest going onto Facebook, because Facebook, they have the groups, and you can usually find a local club in your area. But AUVSI, like Adrian's chapter here, Lone Star chapter of AUVSI, they're also a great resource when it comes to other pilots and fly time. And
Yeah.
Adrian, don't forget to mention your program for later on, specifically on flying and inviting people to come out and fly, because like you said, Tristan, it's about first of all safety, but
Right.
when you go out and fly in a group, a recreational group, then there's usually a visual observer too. It's always good
Correct.
to fly as a
Yeah.
partner. And if you and sometimes that's hard to find. Sometimes it's hard to get somebody to come out. So when you go out as a group, then you can trade off and say, I'll be your visual observer, and then you can switch off and be their visual observer. So that's another great way. I know you had some specifics and some points that you really wanted to make, Tristan. Do you want to share your screen and go over some of them?
Sure. Before I get into that real quick, yeah.
Yes.
And that's how Nettie, or my drone partner Nettie, and I started out. We found each other on Facebook, and from there on, we had a couple meets, to the point where she was flying her brand new Phantom at the time, and I was all like, okay, I need to get something like that. But I learned very quickly, it's like, just like a Marine Scout sniper, a sniper never works alone. So with that being said, especially when you get into the scene, it's always great to have someone alongside with you that's going to be your visual observer.
Yeah, I agree.
And with that said, let me go ahead and share my screen.
Great, thank you.
And let's see if it sharing. Okay. All right, here we go. Okay.
Looks good.
All right. Recreational drone pilots stepping into a new era of cinematography. And all right. The skies belongs to everyone. The world is a huge playground for everyone to explore, from the ground, the seas, and the air. So with that said, the world is really a huge playground. I mean, as long as mankind in history has began to explore, in today's age now, where pretty much almost every inch of land has been explored. But the question is now, are you, as a drone pilot, are you willing to, change the way you view the world by flying a drone, and then how you see it, and then to capture the beauty of what, in your immediate surroundings or wherever you stand in the world? Now, getting into that, a drone is not a toy. I can't stress that enough. A drone is not a toy. Safety, safety, safety. If you can't respect the safety, the law, and everything else that encompasses safety in operating a drone, once again, you have no business in flying. While operating a drone, you should know your surroundings. Look at the environment around you, and understand what kind of obstacles are in your way, especially flying in a semi-urban environment or along even a beach coastal line. You got palm trees out here in the West Coast. Things can happen. Know your surroundings. And also part of knowing your surroundings is the weather factor. Have fun with it. Enjoy it. Before you get into wanting to be a commercial pilot, learn to have fun with it. Showcase your work. Share your still photos or your videos. I don't know how many times I've had people approach me when they see my work on my YouTube channel, or stuff on my other social media platforms that I share my videos and still shots that I capture with my drones. The praises is one thing. How much praise I get is one thing, but you'll never know when someone comes up to you and then actually all of a sudden, you know what? Hey, I would like to, have you help me capture some videos and stuff. But you never know sometimes when you get into something and having fun with it, how far it could really take you. Now, when I say viewing the world, there are no limits in how you can see and then capture the beauty of the world with drones as well. And last but not least, understand your drone's capabilities. And when I say understanding your drone's capabilities, when you buy a drone, you don't just fly it just to fly it. First of all, read the instructions. I cannot stress that enough as well too. I remember when I bought my first drone. Well, no, I'm sorry, my second drone, and it was not secondhand or anything. I looked up the instructions. I took a look at what it's capable of doing and what it can handle. Um, there's a lot of factors involved, but I'm not going to get too much into detail of it. But when you buy a drone, there are certain drones out there that can handle the wind, for example, and sometimes that cannot, and then you'll be disappointed. So do some research on the product before you actually buy it.
Now, I know that, specifically with the FAA, there's a lot of references to follow the guidelines of the manufacturer. Because
Right.
yes, and what it's emphasizing is that you need to know your drone inside and out. And there are a lot of similarities, especially when it comes to the controls and everything like that. They're not that far off
Mhm.
with the different manufacturers, but again, you have to understand how your drone performs, like you said, in weather, in specifically how long it takes. Some respond faster than others. You have different speeds. So all of those, having to understand that is really important. And I always stress too, as even if you're a seasoned pilot, always start your drone, then go around, have a routine, which is like just checkpoints specifically on making sure that your drone that day, that moment, is operating correctly, is responding to your
Right.
controls. So that's really important. So thank you for bringing that up,
Right.
Tristan.
Oh, and to also add further into that, certain drones out there, when you leave your equipment in your car, yeah, heat and your battery don't mix.
No.
I've
Right.
seen batteries expand and people still operate their drones with an expanded or bloated battery or inflated battery, and I'm like, no,
That's
don't.
so dangerous. And even in the cold,
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people, if you're flying in the cold, a
Right.
battery, will be affected by,
Mhm.
like you said, the temperature. So I always
Correct.
suggest putting the battery like maybe on your person, to keep it, to warm it up before you put it in your drone. So yeah, that's really good points too.
Right. Okay.
So basically my playground is from 0 to 400 feet.
400
Tell us
feet.
a little bit about that.
Okay, I came up with that concept after I first flew a few times over, and I was just amazed with the kind of shots I was getting with my very first drone. And then from there on, I was just sitting down one afternoon, and I'm thinking, you know what? I could get very philosophical about this. And that, with that being said, and to expand on my phrase about how I look at the world as a playground, or the world is a playground. Now my playground just increased from 0 to 400 feet. But I say 400 feet because of the safety regulation of that's our nominal or maximum height distance of flying in altitude. So even though I have a limitation cap, but at least I have a better vantage point than someone being on the ground, taking some really great shots with their very expensive DSLR. While, hey, I have now a, a better vantage point than the photographer, or that's just on the ground.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And again, learning 400 feet is the maximum. This is really important. And if you want to talk a little bit about it, is about, taking the trust. And that just
Right.
came out recently where the FAA
Mm-hmm.
is requiring even recreational pilots to take the trust. Now you can access it through different organizations like Pilot Institute and such, but it's a very simple test that you take to get certified as a recreational pilot, but it goes over certain specific safety practices, and also, really understanding the sky. I mean, it may be simple enough, common sense, but it's really important that you're very knowledgeable about it. Don't you agree?
Oh, I totally agree. Um, Not to talk too much about the trust test, when I just took it the day that it was first made available, I, for one, I'm not very good at test taking. I never was. I never was. I was more proficient in doing a test by hands-on, so demonstrations.
Right.
But I was like, you know what? I mean, as much as knowledge I've soaked in, dabbling a little bit on my 107 or my study guide for the 107. And when I looked at it, I was like, wow, actually, I didn't even really need to peer into that. I mean, I'm not saying it's all common sense. If you just look at some of the basic like guidelines and features and that's the great thing about the trust test. When I took it, I was not expecting that, you can do a quick study before you even actually take it. It's not like you just click on the link and then you jump straight into the test already. No, that's a great setup. And with that said, I mean, I didn't even have to like spend the $20 to get my study guide manual for the 107, but yeah, the trust the trust pilot testing, it was a good setup for someone who's novice and at least want to get that. They could take the time to read through the slides on the website before they can actually jump straight into the test.
Right. And I know Adrian's going to go in a little bit more detail with
Right.
Sharon. But, I think that the word test is always a little intimidating.
Yes,
And
yes.
I actually took the trust test while I was on Clubhouse, just to show how simple it was, how simple the answers were. And it's really a fail safe, because if you do answer a wrong question, it gives you the opportunity to choose another option. So so tell us a little bit about, I know that you want to go ahead to the next slide. And I don't know what are we going to be talking about, Tristan?
All right, the bottom quote, flying a drone comes with great responsibility. Okay. With safety being the big theme, the essential theme of my PowerPoint presentation. When getting into something where there's laws, there's a lot of laws involved, there's a lot of, debates going on about like how recreational drone pilots should be in terms of how they should behave when pilot. I want to change um that that view, or like how some licensed pilots out there, or just non-pilots out there in general, just people in general, how they view recreational pilots is like reckless. And I want to reiterate and stress to every single recreational pilot and even 107 pilots that when flying a drone, whether it's for commercial purposes, for leisure slash recreational, it comes with great responsibility.
Agreed. Agreed. And I think that when you say recreational, a lot of people automatically think novice or inexperienced, and that's just not the case. And that's one of the things that I really wanted you to emphasize, is about being a recreational pilot doesn't mean that you have really less responsibilities when it comes to safety in the air.
Right. Okay. So with that responsibility, this is not a toy. A drone is not a toy. When you hear terms like, oh, this is more, built to be like a toy as versus to like a DJI or Autel product where it's built like quality build. A drone is 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 a drone. It's a piece of tech. No matter how, even if you ever go to a mall and then you see some of those toy kiosks where they sell those unicopter toys, still you can hurt somebody flying one of those things.
Yeah,
Even
right
though
in
they
the
fly what
land
right.
on the eye, or hit yourself in the eye.
Exactly. I mean, I actually had my nephew almost lost his eye when someone who was doing a demonstration of it and lost pretty much lost control of this RC helicopter, and it cut the side of his eye. And
Yeah, it can be it really can be dangerous.
yes.
And when you see drones that are off the shelf, especially the inexpensive one. I mean, at this time you could get a drone for $20, to start
Right.
off with. The thing that I think recreational pilots need to understand is that with a drone like that, it doesn't respond as precise as like maybe off the shelf DJI,
Right.
because I mean, I think there's about 5 feet of variances, on when you're flying those drones, of it responding and how fast and so forth. So I think that's really important to understand. Sometimes, a lot of the times, it's actually harder to fly the less expensive the drone is. And
Right.
so, here, this is a gateway for, especially, and I wanted you to kind of address this about parents buying, Christmas is coming up, right? And
Right.
a lot of drones are purchased at the time, especially when Junior wants the drone and the experience. I don't discourage it. I think it's an amazing thing, but
Yes.
it's not just the responsibility, it's the responsibility of the parent to teach and to understand it just as much as the child, of that. Number one, it's not a toy, it is a responsibility, but it's certainly an exciting gateway to an amazing career too. But I wanted to emphasize, especially for our viewers that really just want to get into the drone world, that we're going to be talking about this in our next workshop, specifically about drones in the market and what kind of drones to buy for specific operational. In other words, are you doing it for cinematography? Are you doing it to do surveys? Are you going to take it out just when you're on vacation? So having an understanding of what the different drones that are out there. I mean, DJI in particular really made drones accessible,
Oh, yes.
quality drones accessible. So yeah, if you want to talk a little bit more about the responsibilities, especially for a parent when they purchase it, that would be great.
When a parent decides to buy a drone for their child, it's of a great importance that they stand side by side with them, with the child,
Yes.
making sure that they're not going to fly into something, because time and time again, whenever you give a child a toy, even that it's not a toy, they'll just automatically just open it up and they just want to take it out and go. It's the parent's responsibility to stress the importance of operating such a device, such a piece of technology that has created worlds of wonder, but to stress the responsibility of operating it and the safety and the importance of safety is the parent's biggest responsibility, and to stress that to their child. It's not a toy. It's not, to begin with. I mean, God forbid that the child, while the mom and dad's away, they're out having dinner, and then the babysitter is like, oh, not paying attention. Next, the child decides to fly their drone. That's also another thing to consider about too. That's why, I mean, there could be a debate on the age factor of using it. I mean, by the time you're 13, the child's been, or that, the teenager's mentality changes a bit, when being bombarded with social media and what's happening out there and the hype and doing this or doing that. God forbid that it could go totally into a negative direction. So that's a topic of discussion for something else. But as it stands right now, what is it to, just real quick, the test taking, the age minimum is 13, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But so I would suggest, because there are many children that are under 13. I think it would behoove the parent to actually be the
Mhm.
one to take the trust test, so that they have a clear understanding, at least the beginning of an understanding of the responsibilities of flying a drone in the air. And then of
Right.
course, setting limits so that the only time that the child can fly is when they're present. And I don't mean present meaning in the same room. I mean standing right behind them, that they can grab the controls.
Right.
That's so important, that it's not just, okay, I'll watch him and I'll sit over here at the picnic table and see how he flies or how he's performing. It's really important that they can take over, because
Right.
it can be dangerous. And
Mhm.
it's just really important to
Right.
as an example, as a parent, it's really important. And if the parent is not familiar, not even interested in it, then I think it is the responsibility of a parent to find a mentor that the child can fly with.
Yeah, and see, that's the interesting part too. As far as I know, any old 14-year-old male or female can just walk into a Best Buy, and if they have the cash to pony up to get a DJI drone, oh man.
Yeah,
It's
there's
like
some
it's like one of
cost.
those things. Yeah, see, and that's something I wanted to raise right there. It's one of those things where it's like, okay, maybe we should have like a, well, there is a 107, but then again, make maybe a basic operator's license outside of the trust, like how we have like a Class A driver's license to operate an automobile, right? No, maybe something, you have to be at least 13 years old to operate an actual, depending on the class of the drone. Like a toy grade drone, that's one thing. I mean, or I shouldn't say that. I said toy. A drone is a drone is a drone. Okay. Depending on the class of the drone, though,
Right.
like even DJI's not so high end, like a Mavic 2 or a Phantom series drone, but their Mavic Mini lineup, maybe that might be an exception. I don't know. There could be just a lot of factors and variables involved in trying to figure out something of this caliber of setting regulations for that. I mean, I don't want to go much into it more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I know that there's been talk throughout, well, the FAA and some of the organizations
Hmm.
uh, in regards to, do we make it just so that they can just go ahead, and if they have the money to buy a drone
Right.
off the shelf, do they just buy it, or is there something that requires them to understand, in other words, have a license to buy it?
It's kind of like,
um,
it's pretty much in the same realm. I'm gonna compare drones to buying a firearm, a small firearm,
mhm.
handgun or a rifle. You have to be a specific age to buy a firearm, with the notable exception of, I think you have to be at least 14 or 15 to buy a BB gun in certain states. And then some states, I don't know. I mean, well, like I said, I don't want to get too much into it, but yeah,
Right.
I think there should be some level of control or regulation, I should say, to purchasing a higher class, higher grade drone like DJI drones or Altels. Yeah. Okay, next slide. Safety, 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 safety. I can't think of any other word that matches the word safety in terms of how much awareness you must have, how focused you have to be in operating a drone. And with that said, if you can't operate your drone safely and responsibly, you have no business operating a drone. None. If you can't respect your surroundings, if you can't be focused in flying and operating the drone, and if you can't adhere to the safety practice of operating a drone, we're not even going to get into the law part. So you know what? Forget it. You have no business operating a drone.
Well,
To
the
me, yeah.
FAA has really made a lot of the information um, accessible, very accessible. But there's also a
Oh
lot of
yeah, definitely.
organizations, not just clubs, but there are organizations, profit or nonprofit, that actually offer uh, just information on safety specifically, but how to, and Evan will be talking about it later on in this workshop, of how to understand airspace, how to do your simple maintenance of your drone before you operate, and even after your fly, you know, to do a checklist specifically. But there are a lot of we're encouraging at this time a lot of the information on you know, getting into our schools, specifically on the STEM programs, so that sorry, there's a fire right now. The STEM programs specifically, where they will teach the children the responsibilities of a drone. So I think that's really important. Absolutely.
Oh, before you even have a conversation about the regulations and laws that are set by the FAA, once again, if you can't get a novice pilot to wrap the word safety in their head and then to act responsibly in operating the drone,
Right.
we can't even have a conversation about laws and regulations. That's already at a halt, a standstill. If the pilot can't respect the airspace, or not even the airspace, but respect and operating the drone responsibly and safely, then we can't even hold a conversation about talking about airspace regulations and and so forth. Yeah, we can't even have you couldn't even progress into that next level. The first step is always the safety portion and operating the drone responsibly. That's the number one step before we even have a conversation about laws and regulations.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. All right. When operating a drone, you should know your surroundings. Do some research. Check out the place that you're flying at. You know, look at what's the tallest. Like what I like to do when I fly, especially at a brand new spot, I always look for like the tallest things around. And then from there on, I keep that in mind as what would be my operating safe, or like minimal low altitude flying height, and then add plus to whatever to the 400 feet. Plan out your shots. You know, how do you want to achieve those shots? And that's something encompassing in the cinematography aspect. But just basically, like when you get to a spot, when a drone pilot gets to a spot, what kind of shots are you trying to go for? And take a look at, once again, your surroundings, and then know the direction of where you want to go and how you want to do it. Kind of wrap around in your head. One idea I always like to do is just throw the drone in the air, but just only going straight up, so raising altitude, and then just do a full 360 view of your immediate surroundings, so you have an idea of what's around you. I think that would be the best way to go about doing it. And then when you start flying, especially in a brand new area that you've never flown at, the very first time you fly around, fly slow. Or if you're operating a DJI drone, flying it in a cinematic mode or tripod mode, where you're not exceeding even past 6 miles an hour. So you're just cruising around, just taking a look. At least you'll be also aware of your surroundings as well too. But as always, when you're flying a drone, stay focused and stay alert. The ears, your eyes are your best friend. Okay. Do you want to add anything to that, Maggie? You're muted.
Maggie's muted.
No, sorry about that. I muted myself.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. You brought up one point that we hadn't mentioned before. You can actually set your altitude. So like if you are, it kind of, the drone will automatically go to that altitude to fly home. And so you want to make sure that you set the altitude over the tallest, whether it be a building or trees. So when you say be aware of your surrounding, that's one of the key elements, is being aware that what's the tallest landmark there, and set your altitude there, so that if there is an emergency or you're flying home, it will fly to that let's say you set it to 300, it'll fly all the way to the home point at 300. So it clears all of the high obstacles. So yeah,
Right.
that's really good. Thank you.
Mhm. Okay. After respecting the safety and assuming the responsibility of operating a drone and so forth, have fun with it. You'll never know what can spark your creativity, your visual creativity when flying a drone. The kind of shots that you could produce. I mean, when after understanding your drone's limitations and its capabilities, what kind of camera systems on there, from there on, and then as well, once again, flying safely, knowing your surroundings, have fun with it. I've always been taught that before I make it as like a job where I'm just getting request after request, contract after contract, getting into the drone scene, and when I first just did it as okay, I want to test the waters to see where this goes. I automatically accepted the fact that, all right, when I bought this very first piece of drone, or this piece of wonderful technology behind it, and I didn't realize like how much I can add more to my cinematography work. I got to the point where I was having fun just to fly. I mean, it will probably be the closest thing I will get to, before I even fly an actual fixed wing aircraft or a helicopter at some point, which I hope to in the near future. Real quick, so from my understanding, if you're a licensed 107, or once you become a licensed 107 pilot, it's also a great avenue if you want to pursue to getting a helicopter operator's license, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
actually, this is the first gateway of being involved in aviation and
Mm,
having the credibility.
okay.
And I think not even with the 107, but just getting certified through the trust. And that's one of the segments I want to
Okay.
go to soon. Is Adrian's going to talk a little bit about the trust and also the difference between a 107 and a
Mhm.
recreational pilot. So I'm really looking forward to hearing his perspective. And
Right.
now that he has just been awarded the position as the president of the North Texas drone user group, I'm looking forward to hearing his perspective also. But from what I understand, the evolution of your experience with drones. I mean, you were in the military. You were introduced basically to drones and the technology,
Mhm.
and then when you got out of the military, you had more of a creative aspect of what to do with drones, and then you saw the capabilities specifically with cinematography.
Right.
And now, from what I understand, Tristan, is that you got into the FPV, which is the first,
Yes.
what is it, the FPV stand for?
First person view.
Okay, so
Mhm.
basically, tell us a little bit about the advancements there, because we had a guest speaker from our North Texas racing group here,
Mhm.
and they have the FPVs. And again, a lot of them
Right.
are just are recreational. They don't have their 107. They do this as a sport, as fun. Tell us a
Right.
little bit about your experience with it, and also the responsibilities with that, because it's a little different. You really do need a visual observer when you do an FPV, because
Oh,
you're
big
wearing
time.
these goggles and you don't have a perspective of what's outside around you. You're actually the eyes of the drone, correct?
Correct. Um, Actually, the interesting part about DJI's FPV drone, there's a part where once you take off, it'll actually tell you where your home point, where you first launched at. So when you're flying around, and if you're trying to look for your home point, once you see the letter H show up on the screen, now you know what direction you're going to. So it's actually already set in stone. So, but it is a very important to have a visual observer when operating in like lengthy flights. But when I just use just one battery, and if I'm flying in close range, and what I consider as close range is anywhere within about 800 feet, or 1,000, or 800 to 1,000 feet in radius from where I'm
Mm-hmm.
standing, where I took off from, I'm gonna admit I operate solo. But at the same time, though, it's always great. Like if I'm going beyond that point, that it's always great to have a visual observer just in case something may happen, or if there's some manned aircraft out there and and if I'm not aware of it. That's why the ears part comes into play, especially when you hear helicopters around and so forth. But see, now this is where DJI got really crafty about how they wanted to, stress the importance of operational safety, is their ABS system. So the detection of other manned aircraft, or even unmanned aircraft around too. So you're aware of what's in your surroundings. And thus far, that has helped me immensely.
Right.
Um,
Well, I think with FPV, you have to be just like any drone, you have to be aware of what's in the air, but also what's
mhm,
on the ground. Because
right.
depending on where you're flying, even if you're flying 800 feet away, if you're in a park and there's a lot of people in
Mhm,
that park and they come up and start talking to you, could you imagine somebody tapping you on the shoulder and you're totally alone? If you have that visual observer, they
right.
kind of keep you in a protective bubble where somebody can't approach you while you're actually operating the drone. And again,
Right.
there's other things in on the ground that all of a sudden can affect your
Right.
performance. So I think that's very important. Well, do you want to go ahead and end your presentation with a takeaway?
Hmm. Okay. All
Let me
right.
think. Safety.
Yeah, I was gonna actually about to say that. All right. So with that said, safety is paramount. Safety, flying your drone safely is a very important. It's very important. Flying responsibly, can't stress that enough. It's very important that you take drone flying very seriously,
Right.
but also as well to have fun with it. Now, my personal experience in terms of like when I fly drones is that, like I said earlier, I have multiple drones, at least six. I call them my six primary drones that I like to fly. And it's like an artist having different paintbrushes. You have your big fat brushes, you have your little fine point brushes. Those six drones have a different purpose. The FPV drone, for example, if I want those high, smooth cinematics, fast paced shots, I go with that. If I want to capture whatever it is I'm trying to capture with the best camera unit that I have, then my Air 2S. I'd like to get a Phantom 4 V2 at some point. Hint, hint. But other than that, um, my my Mavic Mini, I like to fly for close range and then get really tight up shots that some of my larger drone platforms I won't be able to get with. But overall, it's all about the safety, safety, and then having fun.
Well, I
With that
really
said,
appreciate it. Yes.
thank you very much.
If there's any questions, thank you so much for your time and having the
Mhm.
perspective of a recreational pilot. Is there any other questions from the audience? Tristan has to leave early, so I wanted to make sure if there was any information. Tristan, how do we get a hold of you if we want more information?
I don't know if anybody is able to look at the because I remember you told me earlier to put down my contact info and then
Right, through the
my
chat.
group, right? If that's open to everybody, that like to the audience as well
It
to view.
is. It is. So if you'll put that in the chat, people can
It's
reach
already
out.
done. It was done a
Great.
while back. Yeah. So if they could
Fantastic.
scroll up through the chat again, it has my email address. So if you want to contact me directly, you can go through that. Or if you have a Facebook account, then you could send a request to join my private group, Velfar Drone Squadron. And I teach people there how to operate drones safely and as well to get advanced flying techniques or advanced flying camera techniques. So getting those cinematic shots instead of using the automated intelligent flight modes that DJI has implemented in their systems as well. And other than that, yeah, that's it.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. Just so everyone know, there is a survey on our chat. We're going to be sending it out to your email when you registered for the actual workshop. Please fill that out so that we know that, you know, we can cover information. If you're specifically looking for us to present a certain title or subject, then we know that there's a need for it. So we really appreciate that. And going to our next segment, I am so excited because again, we have another recreational drone group with Adrian Doko. He's also the president of the AUVSI Lone Star chapter. And of course, we have our Sharon Rossmark, who's the Women of Drones that represents women in the industry. So Sharon, go ahead and take it away. Really, really happy to have you all. And by the way, the Lone Star chapter, AUVSI, is one of our sponsors. So thank you again.
Well, thank you, Maggie. And can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you great.
Great. Well, good morning, everyone. And thanks for the introduction. And thanks to Tristan for his insights into the drone club that he runs out there in California. However, let's move on. For our next conversation, we will transition to a discussion about the FAA requirements and regulations about flying drones for fun or recreational flying. As Maggie just said, my name is Sharon Rossmark, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing Adrian Doko, president of the Lone Star Texas Association for the Unmanned Vehicle Systems, better known as AUVSI, as well as many other titles that we have. So welcome, Adrian.
Hey, Sharon, thanks for having me.
Great. So Adrian, you know, I just did one quick sentence about your background and your experience, but for those of you that don't know Adrian, I have up on the screen there his bio. And Adrian has an impressive track record within the industry, and thus he is considered one of the leading expert voices. And I'm also proud to call him a friend. So Adrian, you know, you've got a lot of detail there around different aspects of how you show up in the industry, which I think is fabulous. But I thought for our audience who may be recreational pilots or recreational drone flyers or wish to be, that maybe we could review a few key terminology that will explain some of the elements that's on the slide right now in regards to your background. So if you wouldn't mind taking a moment, just kind of walking them through what the FAST representatives, drone pros are, as well as the other terminology that's there.
Sure, Sharon, thanks again. So full disclosure, I am not directly with the FAA. We're more in a volunteer role, representing the FAA as a safety team representative. And basically what we try to do is educate and advocate to keep the national airspace as safe as possible. With that being said, we've been labeled drone pros. I'm not the biggest fan of that particular label. However, you know, we try through leadership to mainly get the recreational, even and the commercially Part 107 pilots to have a set of standards and adhere to those standards to keep our airspace safe. So essentially, I'm the lead drone pro here in North Texas. We try to have outreach engagements through fly-ins, webinars. We go out to schools, airports, hobby shops, and just try to explain the importance of safety and educate folks. So that's one of the titles. I'm also the Lone Star chapter president for the Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems International. Here in Texas, the whole state of Texas, we try to educate, advocate, and connect people with the resources in the unmanned system space. So that's one of my, for the past almost 3 years now, I've been really engaging either at state, federal, or local level on pushing the initiatives for drones, et cetera. I'm also a flight engineer for drones. So basically, pre-flight inspections, we do safety protocols, planning, monitoring the flight paths, as well as understanding different payloads, sensors, and propulsion systems. And then finally, I'm also a level 1 UAS thermographer, drone thermographer. So we try to use these different thermal or infrared sensors to find anomalies and detect and analyze certain situations, whether it's infrastructure, all types of different utilities. We use thermal payloads to detect and analyze any deficiencies or anomalies. And that's pretty much it as far as this slide. If you want to move on to this next slide.
Yes. So regarding recreational flight, you know, in today's world, when a consumer can order online, be it Amazon or some other national retailer or any retailer that has a website, they can go online and purchase a drone. They can certainly go to their local store, be it Costco or any number of other local retailers and purchase a drone and open it up and put it in the sky. And you know, in some ways that is flying a drone. However, as we both know, as well as many in our audience and on this call today, understand that there is a difference between recreational flying and commercial flying. And it's important for people to understand that let's not just open up the box and put the drone in the air. So why don't you walk us through what is meant by recreational flight?
Oh, of course. So essentially, under the FAA's USC 44809, I know it's a technical term, but that is the terminology we use under the Part 107. The recreational flight, essentially, a lot of people don't understand. A recreational flight is not operated for a business or any form of compensation, and that could mean several things. So even furtherance of business or credits could classify it as a non-recreational flight. So if you're trying to help out a friend or a local church, get some pretty pictures, that doesn't classify as a recreational flight. So recreational flight is purely and simply for fun and enjoyment. And that's a lot of people misconceive, well, I'll just fly this under recreational, but even the recreational flight falls under a Part 107 ruling. So essentially the FAA created the trust test, the recreational UAS safety test, to have some sort of risk mitigation where people would actually understand the basics. And I encourage everyone to go online and take the trust test. I mean, it's a very, very simple and effective way of learning your basics, right? We know we don't need to fly anywhere near, well, essentially 5 miles near an airport. We have to be careful on the different airspace that we try to fly under recreational purposes, under 400 feet, et cetera. But essentially a recreational flight, you know, there's no form of compensation, whether it be monetary or credited in some way, shape, or form.
In fact, if you don't mind, let me just interrupt there. I think that is an important point, and that's the reason why it's in red, that we emphasize no form of compensation. And most people think of compensation as having a financial exchange. But we actually, on the next slide, have some examples where you actually may be thinking that you're helping someone out as a favor, but it is technically a form of compensation. And so if you wouldn't mind just kind of walking us through an example or two, and as well as review the whole issue around goodwill, where you're thinking just helping out a nonprofit may be okay or acceptable as recreational flying.
Yeah, great point, Sharon. Unfortunately, you know, the FAA is not trying to stop your party or ruin your fun. There's a reason that these rules are in place, and safety, like we said earlier. But you know, we have to understand when we speak of safety, we're technically speaking of a life and death situation where we can ground an aircraft in some instances, or cause bodily damage or injure you know, a crowd of people. So you know, when a friend tells you, hey, let's take some photos of this building I'm trying to sell, and he's not going to pay for it, the end game is still there's going to be some sort of monetary gain or some furtherance of business of sorts. So that falls under Part 107, a commercial operation. So be very careful. You know, the FAA is not trying to crack, well, I don't want to say crack down, but we're just here trying to better understand or teach people on the right way to do things, because there's a huge public perception piece to the drone space. You know, we've been stigmatized by Hollywood and the news that drones are bad, you know, and we want to change that. And by implicating these the trust test and educating people and advocating for safety, I think that's the best way to achieve our goal of keeping the national airspace as safe as possible.
Absolutely. And, you know, the one example, the last one on the page, when you just think you're helping out a nonprofit, maybe it's your kid's school or an organization that you're passionate about and you do volunteer work and you think, oh, okay, well, I'll just help them out by taking some aerial photos or video of a program or of a coastline or something. That is considered compensation. And so again, safety, 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 but we want people to understand that unless you're flying strictly for fun, your own fun, it is considered compensation. And so with that, you know, the FAA has specific rules for recreational flyers. And so the next few slides will cover that. So Adrian, please take a few minutes and cover these bullets for us.
Yeah, so the first one, obviously, any furtherance of business or indirect compensation is definitely not allowed. You need to get your Part 107. And I want to encourage people, a lot of people are intimidated by the Part 107 certification. It's not that difficult. It can be achieved. You know, people always get discouraged because it can be arduous to understand the airspace and read, you know, airspace maps or space charts. It's not that difficult. If you can dedicate a week of your time, you know, a couple hours a day, you can achieve the Part 107 certification. But you need to follow the safety guidelines. You know, the FAA recognized community-based organizations, what really hasn't been defined yet, but there will be parks, the FRIAs, you know, recognized identification areas that the FAA has that you'll be able to fly under recreational purposes. But, you know, you need to follow the safety guidelines, and they're there for a specific reason. So yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the next slide.
Yes.
You definitely want to keep your drone within visual line of sight. I can't tell you how many times this is really disheartening to see people without understanding the dynamics of flight. You know, depth perception is a thing. You may think your drone is somewhere when, you know, you're flying in front of it, but it could be completely somewhere else. So specifically, keep your drone within your line of sight. That's the best safety measure you have to, you know, prevent a fatal accident or crashing into a building or whatever it may be. So definitely keep it within line of sight. And then we also,
you know what, on that point, before you move on, I think it's important maybe to just briefly touch upon what's meant by line of sight in terms of the visual part. As in unaided. So basically, yes, if you wear corrective lenses or glasses, then that's fine. But when you talk about other means of visual line of sight, if you just can touch upon that briefly.
Sure, yeah. So a lot of the FPV drone pilots don't have a line of sight, even though they have a digital feed. So you cannot have binoculars or any digital feed to find, you know, where your drone is. It has to be either through your eyeballs or corrective lenses. So you definitely want to keep it in sight at all times.
Right. And then when we talk about a visual observer, just speak briefly about having a visual observer and what their role is in the process of flying a drone.
Yeah, so the visual observer is your extra set of eyes on the ground, and usually they're within distance. If not, you're in radio communication and you've established a connection with your visual observer or VO, and they're going to be, you know, your insurance policy, where they can call out just in case you do lose line of sight. You can rely on your visual observer to, you know, clarify, hey, you know, we're 3 o'clock, 2 clicks this way, or, you know, that they can align the drone so everyone's on the same page on where you're located in the airspace.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing that, because, you know, you're a pilot, I'm a pilot, and it is so tempting to look down at your screen, but then when you look up, you think, oh, it's in the exact same place it was momentarily a minute ago, and it's not. And that's where a visual observer can be helpful, or just even that slight movement of your eyeballs from the screen up to the sky for that momentary look. You'll lose your drone. It's very easy. You know, if nothing else, maybe the sun is in your eyes, any number of factors. So let's go on to the next one.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next one is definitely crucial. You definitely want to fly under 400 feet AGL. So you can't, you know, there's a reason that rule's in place, because manned aviation, you know, there's, I think, a 100 feet buffer, but 500 feet and above is usually where your choppers, your medevacs, things of that nature are occupying. So keep it under 400 and be aware of where you're flying. You want to stay away from your the B, C, D, and E air class. That's Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and Echo. And you can use Lance or the drone zone to kind of configure what type of airspace. So there's apps out there like Aloft, Open Skies by Google. Before You Fly is one that FAA created specifically to understand what type of airspace you're operating in. And these are all free apps. All these resources have been made available by the FAA so you can better understand the flight dynamics of where you're flying.
Yeah, and I think it's important again to emphasize that these are free. So please take the time to download whichever app of choice you prefer. But it's better to have it than to not have it, so you know exactly that you're following the rules. And if any of this sounds Greek to you, as he just said, the different classes of airspace, that's why it's important to take the trust. But he's going to come back to the trust here in a few minutes. So let's go to the last bullet on this page.
Yeah, so again, fly under 400 feet, even in uncontrolled airspace, which is Class G or Gulf or general airspace, as we like to call it, you know, classes of airspace, flying restrictions can be found on those apps that I mentioned Before You Fly. But regardless of where you're flying, even if it's uncontrolled, you have to understand that these are not toys. Mistakes can happen, and 9 out of 10 times it's pilot error and not understanding the rules and regulations. So thank you for bringing that up, Sharon.
Absolutely. And then we have a few more rules. Next page.
Yeah, so this is fairly new, as Maggie mentioned earlier, the trust test. So it's an initial form of getting into, and the first thing that I definitely want to mention before I forget is this is the easiest way to get into aviation. You know, essentially it costs you 15 to 20,000 to get a pilot's or Part 61 certification. And now with $150, you can become a certificated remote pilot. So I encourage everyone to take the Part 107 test, but before you get there, you definitely want to get the trust test. So this is going to give us credibility for recreational flyers. If you're ever approached by public safety or an FAA official, well, now you have some sort of certificate that you can prove that you're proficient in flying at a recreational level for fun and enjoyment. So the trust test is administered by several dozen entities. If you want to, you can go onto Google and search for trust test facilities. And this is free. There's no reason why you should be paying for this. So don't get lured by different websites trying to charge. This should be a free resource for you. And I would highly recommend you get the trust test.
Absolutely. And then the next item talks about registration and mark. Let's talk in detail about that. Can you share with our audience some insights into that process?
Yeah, so you always want to carry some form of documentation if you're ever approached by public safety, law enforcement, FAA officials. And as far as the trust test, you also are going to need to register your drone. So I have everything in my little lanyard here. I have my Part 107, my trust test, all the aircraft that are registered through the FAA drone zone, always on me at all times, because you want to make sure that you have whatever information might be required or you have to present to prove that you're supposed to be there. You don't want to be operating nefariously and not have any documentation, because that sets off all types of red flags. So I would highly recommend just make a printout. And the PDF version or the digital version is not going to cut it most of the times. It's always great to have a paper copy, because you might be operating in some spaces that are cell denied or you don't have internet. So always keep a hard copy with you if possible. Smart
tip. And then the next one about operating your drone in a dangerous manner. What's an example?
Well, you know, aggressive patterns or flights, you know, you really want to control, because a lot of these people, a lot of the recreationalists don't understand the dynamics of battery, your battery performance. It changes drastically when you're constantly being aggressive on the sticks. You know, you need to have smooth and fluid motions. You also need to stay away from any drugs or alcohol, you know, before you're operating your drone. That's an obvious one. And just be aware of your surrounding airspace. Don't fly next to, you know, schools or prisons, or these things are common sense items. But just be aware of where your flight path is going to be pre-planned, and understand the dynamics of that neighborhood. Or flight over people obviously is not a good idea. And just use common sense, obviously.
Right. And as Tristan mentioned earlier, there have been people who've had numerous injuries. I think he talked about his brother or someone that he knows whose eye was sliced or cut because of a drone. People need to understand that when those propellers are spinning, they're like a weapon. They can definitely injure.
Yeah, we know of an incident about 8 years ago when someone was actually decapitated by a larger drone. It was a helicopter drone. And yeah, it's scary. So you have to, we can't stress safety enough, because all it takes is 1 or 2 incidents like these, and it could really shed some damaging light to our industry.
I think Tristan said it well: safety, 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 and safety. You can't get enough of it in there. So let's talk a little bit about the trust test.
Yeah, the cool thing about the trust test is, first of all, it's free. Anyone can take it. And it gives you a sense of belonging. Now you're part of something bigger, that you really have accomplished something. You understand the basics of flying as a recreational drone operator. So, it's available now. You can get it online. There were several places that I think Maggie mentioned. The Pilot Institute is where I took mine. And it's definitely free. And there's no age limit. So my daughter is 7 years old, and we've taken it together and we fly together. So I want to encourage everyone. This is super simple. You couldn't fail if you wanted to. Whenever you have a wrong answer on a question, it'll take you back and walk you through the process of why that answer was wrong, and what and it'll give you the opportunity to get it right. So the trust test is a super no-brainer. It only takes about 10 minutes to complete, and you do get that certificate to present to any public safety officials or FAA representatives as well, to kind of show them that you went through the due diligence of being as safe as possible.
Right. So you've mentioned this a couple of times. I, again, don't want our audience to miss this point. So you take the test, you print off the certificate so that you have a physical copy of it. And then what happens if I lose that trust certificate?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I just want to move back one step. Not only will you need your trust certificate, but if it's your drone, you also want to register it at the drone zone, dronezone.faa.gov site. So have your registration, have your trust certificate. And if you lose that trust certificate, you simply apply and get a new one. The FAA doesn't really keep track. There's a token that's involved. And once you take that test, your information is scrubbed from any database. Well, it never gets on any database, but they don't keep track of trust test certificates like they do for Part 107 certifications. So you'd have to reapply, Sharon.
Right. And I'm emphasizing that because, as you just said, while they may not keep track of it, you want to have proof that you've completed it at the time you may be stopped by law enforcement or someone from the FAA. So as we move into the next part of how trust may apply, let's talk about drones in primary and secondary schools.
Yeah, so there is a big push now from our community to get more drone programs initiated in all types of schools, whether it's primary, secondary. Universities obviously have implemented this. But the cool thing about the schools, if you're flying indoor or within a caged setting, you're not needing to have a lot of these Part 107 certificate. Well, actually, it doesn't fly under the jurisdiction of the FAA because you're indoors. You're not. The FAA is regulating the national airspace. So anything above a blade of grass is the responsibility of the FAA to keep as safe as possible. So, it doesn't prevent the students from flying under direct supervision of Part 107 certificated pilots. So if you are outdoors, if the teacher, for example, is Part 107 certified, they can allow the students to fly as long as they're within, arm's length of the remote pilot. So essentially, there's a lot of ways that we can educate the future generation of drone pilots by incorporating these rules and regulations to schools and educating the future workforce. I get calls all the time from these large aircraft manufacturers that, they're looking for that next generation of pilots and engineers. So we really need to step up and get these schools involved and educate our future workforce.
Absolutely. And you said one thing that I want to make sure the audience takes away from this slide is that if you're flying indoors, the FAA rules do not apply, but that also applies to if you're flying in a cage, correct?
Yes, so a netted batting cage works really well, and it helps to prevent any flyaways and helps with the safety aspect of flight.
Right, great, thank you. I just wanted to emphasize that point again. So as we wind down our conversation with Adrian, one of the things that is great that's coming up here starting Monday is what's called National Drone Safety Awareness Week. This year is September 13th and 19th. Adrian, why don't you take a few minutes to tell us about it?
Yeah, so Drone Safety Awareness Week was created about 3 years ago by the FAA. Obviously, we need to do a better job of marketing safety and drones. So we created a whole week worth of activities and outreach programs, whether it's through webinars, through actual meetups and events. So we'll be having a fly-in next Sunday here in North Texas, educating more people, but having fun. At the end of the day, it's about having fun and getting people together and having these phenomenal conversations on all different aspects of drone flight. So the FAA has done a really good job on creating Drone Safety Awareness Week, and every day tackles a different subject. So it starts with recreational education, and it also goes into the rules, remote ID, ops over people, beyond visual line of sight. It gets into public safety, public acceptance, and all different aspects of drone flight. So I highly encourage everyone to look into it, reach out to a local chapter or drone user group and see if there's any events that you can partake in. It's a great way to educate yourself on what rules and regulations are available now and what's in the pipeline for the future.
And I think you put in the chat information about the North Dallas session next Sunday. Is that correct? Or if you don't mind, just go ahead and tell them about where it's at and what time.
Yeah, so September 19th from 4 to 8 p.m., we're going to have a sunset fly-in. You can find that at the Eventbrite, AUVSI Lone Star Eventbrite link, or also follow us on Facebook. That's AUVSI Lone Star, and you'll have access to sign up through the Eventbrite link. But this is a great way, and we obviously found a great location at a park at the Railroad Park of Louisville. It's Class G airspace, and it's a wide open space. So it's a great, safe way to get together and have all of us flying and really, catch up with the drone community. It's been tough through the pandemic. We used to do this on a weekly, sometimes monthly basis, but just to get the crew back together and see everyone and get some stick time in is always phenomenal.
It is. I'm jealous. I'm not in the Dallas metro area. Otherwise, I would be right there. And probably if it was on a Saturday rather than a Sunday, I would come down for it. So thank you again. So Maggie, I don't know if we have any questions, but we certainly have a few minutes of time for any questions.
Well, I had the question in regards to when you're taking trust, what I'm understanding, Adrian, that there's no age limit for taking the trust. But to register your drone, is that the age 13? They have to be that to register your drone, or am I just pulling that information
Yeah, well, it's going to be a little more difficult to register the drone versus the trust test. So we encourage the parents, depending on what age the child is, but the parents can register the drone on their behalf as well. The trust is open for everyone. I know of kids as young as 6 years old that are flying with their parents, whether it's a fixed wing airplane or a drone, a multi-rotor drone. So we didn't want to limit it to the age. We really want to encourage the younger generation to get involved.
Right. I know that there's a difference between a 107. To register your drone, you have to register each one separately. But with the trust, you can register all your drones all at one time. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And let's just explain a little bit the difference between the trust test or the recreational test. and the Part 107. So if you can imagine, similar to driving, your trust test is essentially like a permit. So you do have a way to fly, but it's kind of limited, whereas your Part 107 is going to be your driver license. So you start with the trust test and don't be intimidated. The Part 107 isn't that difficult. And once you get it, you feel a certain accomplishment that really propels your future in the drone space.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's so many resources on the internet in regards to free information to take the 107. And then of course there's like the Pilot Institute or the GLIME that we had. That was in December of 2020. So anyone that's viewing this, if they want information, just go on to our NorthTexasUAS.com, look at the workshop on preparing for your 107. Paul Duty gives us a great information on how to study for the 107. So I totally agree with you. Don't be intimidated. When I took it, I had no aviation experience whatsoever. I studied for about a week, 2 weeks, and that's probably the shortest you can, and passed by the skin of my nose, but I did pass. Anyway, yeah, that's great information. I really appreciate it. And I love the fact that you guys are, again, starting to have programs outside so that we can meet up and fly. I mean, that's so important. And even though, yes, you know, the Lone Star chapter here is organizing, but I know a lot of the AUVSI and the drone clubs and the drone groups all have their little events or programs so that you can go out and meet up with these people. And I can't emphasize enough, the best way of looking for me was getting onto Facebook, looking at the groups, and you'll see the groups listed in your area. And it's really important. I mean, you know, to like-minded people to go out and to fly, because you have that understanding of, you know, well, you know, everyone's talking about it on this workshop about safety, but until you're out there and really understand, oh, you know, watching maybe as an example, a mentor, you know, seeing what he has on his checklist. You know, just before he even gets that drone up in the air, there's a checklist of exactly what he needs to do to make sure his drone is operating correctly. And also being aware of, like you said, of the outside environments, and also what's inside, you know, whether you are, you know, drugs and alcohol, but maybe you had a really rough night. And you're tired. That's another, you know, that's another concern. You know, you want to be able to fly, because it's multitasking really. I mean, it's flying a drone, being aware of your environment, being aware of your weather, being aware of the pedestrians or whatever activity is out and around. So you give such a great perspective of that. I really appreciate and admire all the things that you do, especially as a fast volunteer. I want to emphasize that you have done so much for our community here, just because you're a representative of the UAS, which is unmanned aerial systems, but you do this as a volunteer, and I really commend you for that. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet. And I want to encourage everyone else, you know, we need more representation. We need more women. We need more diversity to kind of help out. And the FAA is always looking for more representation from the drone community. And on one last thought before we end, you know, I'm always learning about safety. Safety is not a destination, it's a journey. You constantly grow and learn more. So you learn every day in this community. So I want to encourage everyone, get involved. I mean, it's such a beautiful career to be a part of. And just remember, you know, like the FAA administrator, Steve Dixon, said, safety is not a destination, it's a journey. We get there slowly but surely, but we're never really there. So stay safe and fly safe. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I appreciate that you mentioned diversity, because Sharon, I really, as a women in drones representative myself, as you being the president, you have put together a survey on diversity for the very first time when it comes to AUV. So could you go a little bit into detail with that?
Absolutely. And thanks, Maggie, for the opportunity to give a shout out, because the survey is still open until next Friday, as a matter of fact, close of business next Friday. And so as what Adrian just positioned for us, and what we talked about earlier, is that the aviation industry is rapidly approaching a critical stage of talent shortage, particularly for engineers and pilots. And also, as was stated earlier, is that the UAS sector of the industry is really a great way, a low barrier entry into aviation, simply because you have to learn and understand Part 107 just as a starting point from the commercial side of becoming a commercial pilot. And so one of the things, though, is that we needed a fact base to understand where is the industry currently. And so what we did is we partnered with 2 other companies, P3T Tech Consulting, as well as DNNC out of Canada. And we put together a very comprehensive survey that allows the industry companies here in the United States, we're starting strictly with the United States for our first time out, to get a baseline of what does the industry look like from a diversity standpoint, as well as what do they need, because that talent pool is going to be requiring, in order to grow the talent pool, we're going to have an outreach to inspire more diverse talent to come to the industry. And again, not only is it just the UAS industry, it's all of the aviation / aerospace career fields that are in need of engineers and pilots and so forth, that expertise and knowledge. So our first survey is targeted for the UAS, AAM sectors. And I put the link in the chat that you can go out until next Friday, close of business next Friday, to take the survey. As of a couple of weeks ago, we had well over 1,200 responses. In fact, we only extended the date because we said, let's go for broke. We thought that if we could get 1,500 would be awesome. And 2,000 would be just an absolutely incredible one for our first time out. But again, we'll have a baseline, and then that way moving forward, we'll know what's needed. We'll know what industry wants for support. And we want to help provide this opportunity to grow a diverse talent pool for the industry.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to you sharing your findings. I'm hoping to make an announcement. I was telling Sharon, I hope that we can at least announce your findings either in November or December workshop, because I think that that's key. And with all the numerous studies, they show that diversity as a team member, having the different perspectives, the different backgrounds, only makes your team stronger. So I think it's really important that we emphasize that, and to make sure that everyone is represented on in this UAS.
Yeah, and not only does it make teams stronger, it's been proven that more diverse companies have better profit margins and stronger bottom line. So
well, there you go, the bottom line. Yes,
right, exactly. At the end of the day, it's about the economics also.
I hate to jump a little bit. I hate to jump a little bit backwards, but Adrian, one of the things that I think a lot of people, as a recreational pilot, they don't know where to fly. And, you know, this is their first time at it, so they're unfamiliar with how to get to the airspace. One of the things that I wanted to emphasize is the AMA parks, specifically, because we are allowed to fly most of the AMA parks. Is that not correct?
Unfortunately, you have to be an AMA member.
Okay.
I don't know what their dues are, but you know, a lot of these parks are in controlled airspace. So be careful when you're, you know, make sure you understand the rules and regulations for the AMA parks. But, you know, I would recommend just understanding your airspace wherever you live, and find one dedicated spot, preferably a wide open space like a park or over a large body of water. As long as you're in Class G airspace, there shouldn't be any issues with you flying as a recreational flyer.
Right. And I know FAA, thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it. I know the FAA also encourages parks destinations for drone parks. There are some in different areas. I know one in particular is in California, and it specifically says for drone use, you know, for drone users. So that, you know, if you can seek out that information, that's really good too, to start there, because you'll be able to meet again, you know, if you're not in a group, that's a great way of meeting up some people and having, you know, having a partnership. And again, switching over for VAs, visual observers, to the pilot, that's a great opportunity. So thank you so much for clarifying that. I appreciate it.
And so Maggie, one additional point on park flying is that you need to check maybe with the local website of the village or town that owns or is responsible for that park. I know here in Chicagoland, while there are plenty of parks that allow you to fly, there are lots of parks where they don't allow flying, even though it's open space. And if you check the details, or like to say the fine print, they also require that you have insurance to fly in their parks or be a member of AMA. And so even if you're not a member of AMA, maybe you could fly in there, but then you got to have a certain type of insurance and name that park or the park owner, the village owner, however it's worded, as an additional insured. So
Yeah, I think that that's really a good point, Sharon. So if somebody's watching, what kind of insurance do I need? Where do I find this insurance? Do you have a couple tips?
Yeah, so absolutely. So first of all, you need to start off with whether or not you have liability insurance that would cover it. Many homeowner policies may or may not. And I say that because many policies have an aviation exclusion. And even though you're flying recreationally, you can't assume that they're going to cover you. So I would ask you to check with your insurance agent or broker regarding your own personal homeowners or condo or renters insurance, but keep in mind it may not. And then of course there you can come out to the Women in Drones website. We have insurance brokers and agents that are members that we know have either hourly insurance, depending on what your needs are, and or an annual policy, again, depending on what your needs are. But generally you're going to start with the liability policy that you need, and also check about coverage for your drone.
Yeah, just to throw it out there, I know State Farm has, a policy for recreational flyers. And is it Certify is the one hour by hour that has hour by
You're thinking
hour
of
insurance?
you're thinking about Verifly.
Verifly, that's right.
Yeah, and there's others, right? I was
Yes.
trying not to give out the specific.
I
companies.
know, but
Please favor.
sometimes
Yeah.
just at least having some go-to or understanding it. Yeah, so I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And totally comply with that. Yes, absolutely. Is there any other questions? I really don't see anything other than a request for the survey. I think that survey I'm really looking forward to, and please look at the link if you're interested in it, and then follow us in the next couple workshops and we'll have the results there. Again, Sharon, thank you so much for your fireside chat. I always look forward to it, and having the experts like Adrian on it. Adrian, again, you've been amazing as a mentor for so many people out there, and a great example. This last week, we were all at the UAV Commercial Drone Expo, and that was in Vegas, and we saw so many exhibitors there talking about home deliveries, and they're really honing in on the surveying and the LiDAR and the photogrammetry, and also Presert, which is the first responders. There's a lot of different platforms there that are supporting first responders. So I'm looking forward to getting more information and following. So again, I really appreciate it. As always, we always end with Evan Morelli. Evan Morelli, for all those people that don't know how to find the airspace or find Drone Zone, he's the guy that always ends the workshops with all that kind of information. And you're going to talk a little bit about ALOFT too, correct?
Yeah, I am. Thanks, Maggie. So I'm going to be discussing here. Let me go ahead and open up my share. There we go. Okay, so for those that have not listened to my presentation before, my name is Evan Morelli. I run Elm Aerial Services, is a drone consulting company. So we do various kinds of flying for industries like real estate. We've worked with the Parks Department of the City of Chicago. And what I'm here to talk about today is in the context of where we would be if we're recreational flyers. How can we manage our safety, effectively find places to fly, and really bridge what Adrian and everybody was talking about earlier on how to, really get into, whether it's recreational or professional flying, the fundamentals. So we'll talk about step by